thanks, Paul and Bob, for pulling this all together. But first and foremost, just on behalf of the Orlando tech community, we want to make sure everyone is safe. These next couple of days look to be pretty impactful for our region. We're certainly thinking of the people on the West Coast and what they're preparing for. But here in Central Florida, we also want to make sure we're all preparing as well. So we'll certainly spend some time talking this morning, but I would expect most of you to be doing some of your patching up your houses and getting all your plants out of the way and really just taking care of your loved ones.
Mhm.
The only thing to speak of today that we have upcoming, we hope that we see all of you is we have our next tenX event taking place. It will be on Thursday, October 17th. From 5:30 to 8:30. We've decided to do the Ivanhoe Lager House again. It was really just a great turnout and just an excellent venue for us. And then we have our two champion sponsors, which is Brenner Innovation and the Orange County Technical College. But that will be on October 17th. It will be members plus one. And really hope to see all of you there. And with that, I'll turn it over to Paul and to Bob and introduce our panel with these great speakers we have today.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it. And I want to thank Jeremy, Jason, and Teresa for joining us, especially given what's happening with the storm and everything. So thank you. Thank you for blocking out this time and coming in and sharing your perspective on cybersecurity, something that is looming in all of our lives every day. We see it happening almost every time you turn on the news. So we appreciate you sharing that perspective. What I'd like to do is kick off with having you introduce yourselves, just one by one. We can start with Jason, and just give us kind of your 1 minute, elevator pitch, what you do and who you are, so the rest of us here can, get that background. So, Jason, why don't you start?
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Mhm.
My name is Jason. I'm the founder of Breacher AI. We're specialists in deepfake. We do deepfake penetration testing, awareness training, and in detection as well. So basically, kind of a one-spot place for all things deepfake and solutions for generative AI.
Okay, terrific. Jeremy?
Jeremy Vaughn, CEO, co-founder of Start Left Security. We've been in software engineering for about 16, 17 years. Got really passionate about product security almost 10 years ago. And so what we did is we built a platform that is all-inclusive product security to make it cheap, affordable, but also very comprehensive so everybody can protect their software. And we're just on a mission to help everybody, protect themselves, protect their business.
Okay, terrific. And Teresa?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sharisa Jerez. I am the co-founder and vice president of operations of Ashire Technologies. We are a cybersecurity firm specializing in protecting federal information systems. We have proudly supported the U.S. Air Force for the last 7 years, both independently and as a company. And our goal is really focusing on cybersecurity compliance, government mandates that are coming out through the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and making sure that programs are in place and that they're communicated and enforced to protect our nation's warfighters.
Thank you. Thank you. I just have one curious question, Jason. Deep fakes. What the heck? What are deep fakes? This is just
Yeah.
for you.
So deepfakes it's interesting. So deepfakes have been around since 2017. And a lot of people view them as kind of this entertainment, and it's either pictures or video or audio. But within the past year, we've seen the quality of deepfakes just accelerate rapidly. So you're seeing all these crazy videos, which are hyper realistic. And what
Mhm.
adversaries are starting to do is they're starting to use deepfakes as a method of social engineering. So it's basically like phishing or trying to breach an organization using deepfakes. And I think it's a worrying trend that we'll continue to see over next year as it kind of matures rapidly. So we're big proponents of educating users and helping organizations prepare for deepfake by doing penetration testing. So we're actually using a deepfake to try to breach an organization. So that's what we do in a nutshell, and kind of one
Okay.
of the emerging threats.
All right. No,
Can I ask a question, Jason?
yes, please, Jeremy.
Sure.
How do you see like deep fakes like maybe impacting elections here that we're about to experience?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's interesting. Everyone's worried about kind of misinformation for the elections, and we're seeing some evidence of it occurring, but I don't think it's going to be that big of an impact, to be candid, right? Like the UK, they went through their elections and it just didn't have that much of a material impact. I think it will sway, but I think people are kind of aware enough of deep fake to make an educated decision. And I don't think it'll be that huge of an impact, but it's definitely something to watch for sure.
Are the social platforms like starting to put controls in place to monitor too?
Yeah, so a lot of the platforms are starting to put in kind of like labels and watermarking. It says, "Hey, heads up, this is deep fake or generative AI," and I think that's a great step for misinformation. Like it's a very positive step. But there's a lot of laws that are still kind of maturing for deepfake. And surprisingly, Florida has some of the best laws in the nation for deepfake. Like it's one thing that we should be really proud of as Floridians is that we have great laws to protect children against deepfake, and that's tremendous. So
Oh wow.
yeah, a lot of states are still kind of toying around with that idea, and it's really kind of we're really ahead of the curve, which is good. But I don't think deep fakes like watermarks are going to be a solve all, but it's definitely a step in the right direction.
Okay. It's actually a perfect segue into my first question, which was really, what are the evolving threats? So we're aware of some, but where's this going? Where do you see it evolving? Jason, why don't you just continue and then I'll work to the other two panelists.
Yeah, sorry, I don't mean to hog, but
No,
it's
no, that's fine.
uh deepfake is the next iteration of phishing, right? So we're all familiar with phishing emails and
Mhm.
scammers using those to try to social engineer people. The issue is that we've gotten really good at blocking emails at the email gateway from a cybersecurity perspective. And when an adversary is faced with a boundary or a blocker, they will naturally try to evolve their tactics. And that's what we're starting to see is that people are starting to embrace deepfakes as a method to get around the traditional sort of email gateways. So I do think that deepfake, especially, is the next iteration of phishing 2.0 and is one of the most dangerous vectors to watch in the coming year.
Okay, good. How about you, Teresa? And you could probably give us a perspective on government DoD too.
Sure. So I think the evolution is really the strengthening and the more advancing of what we've always seen. And so what I mean by that is, for example, phishing attacks are just getting better and better. Initially we started with the prince in Nigeria who has $1 million and he wants to send it to you, right? And they were very, very easy to spot and just delete and move on. Whereas we've seen a significant advancement in these types of emails. The adversaries and hackers are getting better at trying to convince you that they are who they say they are. And so, for example, in our family, we have an automatic practice to always look at the email sender because sometimes it makes the difference of one, it's Microsoft with a zero instead of an O in the email address.
Hmm.
And so being able to really analyze the source email and where they're coming from to help kind of spot that evolution of advancing phishing attacks. In addition, insider threat. So insider threat is a cyber risk that you have in every organization where someone on the inside, even, a very traditional, good-hearted, ethical person has now come into a certain situation. And as a result of that situation, they're now desperate financially, emotionally, and because of those things, they're now inclined to do something that could cause damage or risk to a company's financial informational resources. Well, that insider, a lot of times the insider threats, they're much more advanced in technology than they were 20 years before, right? People are much more comfortable and familiar with how to use technology, how to navigate, some of the codes and the vulnerabilities or the access points than they were before. So being able to understand what insider threat training looks like and how to spot risks for insider threats that maybe you hadn't thought of in the past before. You said, oh, if we have, a very stereotypical type character with malicious intent, then we know that there's a risk for insider threat. Well, now that might be the CEO's admin who's going through a health scare with her child, and that they need, financial resources to cover chemotherapy. I mean, there's all these different scenarios that could position someone as an insider threat. So I think the evolution is just the advancement of what we fundamentally see in cyber. Those haven't gone away. And as our society advances in education, in tactics, in technology, our training needs to advance alongside that as well.
Okay, thanks. Jeremy, from your perspective?
I'm going to kind of anchor this in a real world scenario that pulls in, I think, what Teresa was saying too around insider threat. We'll talk about regulation. It impacted federal too, which is SolarWinds, right? So I'm going to pick on software vendors, right? So SolarWinds happened, and just like every other software vendor, we API connect into the ecosystems of our clients. This could be federal, it could be enterprise, it could be whatever. But in the case of, let's call it insider threat, it could be malicious or not. And I would say a lot of times people do things that are not malicious. It's by mistake, and it's leaving us vulnerable, right? And so in the case of SolarWinds, somebody turned a code repository from private to public. Whether that was intentional or not, it still left it vulnerable, right? And then so a nation state actor could get in, take advantage of the systems, and then work their way through not only SolarWinds, but their entire client ecosystem, and it spreads like a virus, right? And so when we look at software and software vendors, we are looked at to get SOC 2 certified, right? Or a test attestation. We just did that at our company. Did they validate the security of our code, our CI/CD, our cloud? No. But I'm still able to sell through procurement and be able to connect into these ecosystems, and I may be vulnerable, right? And so all these things are leading to what should be starting to be monitored, but it's very easy to take access, and the what's coming out of that is supply chain security, and this SolarWinds is a pure example of nation state actors taking advantage of software vendors and an incomplete cybersecurity strategy. And so that's what we're seeing. That's our perspective.
Okay.
And there's many more examples of that after SolarWinds.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Jeremy. I appreciate that. All of us here are very, very involved with founders, right? Small businesses. Either we advise them or we are founders in many ways. What we'd like to know is what's your advice as an early stage founder? What can I do to help protect myself? Because I don't have big budgets, right? But I want to be sure that number one, I'm protected as a company, but number two, how do I start to think about my products and services too that I'm offering to the public? So, Teresa, why don't we start with you?
Oh, I'm glad you picked me because I have a wonderful example of a recent situation where a painter who paints the towers at Cape Canaveral came to me at an event almost in tears. And the reason is that the diagrams where the towers are located was stamped as CUI, controlled unclassified information. So because that diagram was stamped as controlled unclassified, it takes the information to the next level and now falls under the new cybersecurity maturity model, the CMMC that the government is driving. And so there was this false information to this poor gentleman who is a painter, he's a team of one, that he would now need to invest $200,000 to gain compliance within the cybersecurity, the CMMC, in order to continue to do business with the federal government and with Cape Canaveral. And I mean, he says, I don't know how I'm supposed to live. And many companies are making the decision to back away from federal government space because of this. but the information is false. So first of all, CMMC has a level 1 and a level 2. The level 2 is really for those defense contractors that are dealing with classified information and that are going to be covering 110 total controls, 93 of which are level 2 specific, which means that level 1 has 17 controls. And these are really just good, strong, basic practices to protect information. Ashire Technologies, we offer a security service provider support where our fees are $35 a month per user. And we're tracking vulnerabilities across your networks. We're identifying any potential hacking activity. We're identifying any vulnerabilities. We're making sure your patches are all up to date. And so in terms of, how do I afford good cybersecurity practices, it's really much more affordable than people initially. And patches and your, Microsoft, Google Suites, they're all free. And you can just go into the settings of your computer and make sure that your patches are all up to date. And that really protects a significant percentage of good cyber practice.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for sharing that, because I think that would be my opinion. Oh my gosh, this is going to cost me a lot of money, just to secure myself. So thanks for that. Jason, how about you?
Yeah, that's a great question. In my mind, do the basics first. Do them very well. Make sure you have just the basics covered. So many ransomware attacks, breaches are just from a lack of doing the fundamentals right. 2FA, having a good email security gateway, do the fundamentals, cover those first, and then cyber insurance as well, right? So the way that you need to perceive cybersecurity is basically it's a risk mitigation. And a lot of businesses are starting to view it as kind of a cost center. And I think that approach is incorrect, right? I think in the next year, we're going to see cyber insurance premiums accelerate and get higher as a result of not investing in cybersecurity. And as a founder, my number one piece of advice is shut up and listen to your customers. It is the most important thing. It's like literally listen to feedback and be frontline, listen to what your customers need, and then pivot and adapt and embrace making your customer successful.
Okay. Jeremy, from your perspective, I'm curious if also from a product standpoint, so if I'm developing my own products and services, is there a different level of security I can look at there to prepare those? Because I want to make sure that I'm not selling something that would make my customer vulnerable too.
Yeah, to me, and I agree with Jason on, listen to your customers, do the basics, right? You have to have those in. It's usually, to Teresa's point, align with some sort of compliance framework. That way it gives you kind of some things to work towards. But don't let the compliance framework blind you from real security. And so I always say, to your customer's point, and what type of product do you have? Is it high sensitive data? Or if somebody got access, like, PIHI, PII type of things like that, or what could that data ruin your whole customer's lives, right? And so like Ashley Madison or any of these other type of dating apps, right? So like just that data going out could destroy lives, right? And so, but then also like life threatening, right? So when you look at like medical device or things like that, how does your product connect to, let's say, IoT, right? Or Internet of Things? Like how does it transmit data back to the product or back to the cloud, right? And so being able to, compliance does not address a lot of those things, right? So you're going to have to sit back and think about how do we actually wrap these things with security above and beyond the basic compliance requirements and really think about security, right? And so you have to listen to your customers because your customers are going to tell you what they want from a procurement standpoint. Those programs are getting more sophisticated, so they're actually getting more security awareness, and then just ensuring that you are actually secure, right? And so penetration tests are a thing. They should be more continuous instead of a snapshot, right? And so the world is moving into The people that breach us and hack us are using sophisticated tools. And
Yep.
I think just to kind of call it out is people think that these people are like in the basement. They're just, they're not sophisticated people. No, like these people get paid in nation states to go after us, right? And they have a lot of funding. And so it's just not about compliance anymore. You have to actually look at security and how things interact with each other and how to secure all the things.
Okay, terrific. Teresa, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I just want to address because I think it's really important in terms of product development and software engineering that there's a huge push now on what we call DevSecOps. So it's development, security, and operations. And that means that we are building the security and the compliance requirements at the source in the development stage. And I think that is a fundamental shift that has gained significant momentum. It's very much government, it's not mandated, but definitely government promoted because we do have these compliance frameworks like NIST 800-161 that talks about supply chain risk, NIST 853 that talks about internal controls. And we have letters from the president that's talking about the requirements for zero trust architecture. So when we can build things like zero trust architecture into the software model, then we're not building a product and testing cybersecurity at the end of the stage and then having to go back and reintegrate these practices into the development. We're actually doing it at the source. We're saving organizations a lot of time and money, and we're making the product a lot more marketable to not only the commercial sector, but also the government sector.
Interesting. Very good. Why don't we continue with you, Teresa? The next question I'd like to ask is looking at sort of the flip side of what are the opportunities? Because, cybersecurity is around us every day. If I'm a founder, I'm in the cybersecurity space. What do you see as the opportunities that are happening there? And maybe they're evolving. Maybe you say, hey, position yourself for this evolving technology. This is where you want to jump in. So just your thoughts on that.
Sure. So I think that the evolution is that the market for cybersecurity specialists is growing. It's a very high demand field. More and more universities are offering cybersecurity specific programs to young students, to founders. There's significant amount of certificates available as well from an educational standpoint. So you don't have to commit to a 4-year degree in cyber. There's a lot of great certificates that are out there. And I think zero trust architecture is probably one of the hot buttons right now is, how can I design systems that we used to do, trust but verify. Now it's never trust, always verify, right? And so even if you're an authorized user, the system is going to be constantly regenerating to make sure that your credentials are approved and allowed access into that network. So I think, like we talked about deepfake, zero trust, the cybersecurity is getting very advanced, very technical. And for me, I'm very biased as a Latina, as a woman. I think that this is an area for young women, for young minority women that have said, well, what am I going to do with my life? How can I go out there and have a career that I can compete? There's a ton of opportunity for this demographic, and I highly encourage them to go after it.
All right, terrific. I appreciate that. No, very good. I'll ask Jeremy and Jason. Jeremy, what are the opportunities out there?
We talking about talent? Because she just covered that.
Okay. Yeah, I'm thinking, is it new products and services? Are there evolving parts of cybersecurity I may want to definitely be part of?
Yeah, I would say, not to throw around the buzzword, but AI. AI introduces a significant amount of risk. From our perspective, developers, quote unquote, developers are being hired who use AI to create code, and they're getting jobs, right? And they're not actually really engineers. So they're using AI to create code. The problem is as even as you use ChatGPT, you have to be an expert in some subject to kind of tune it and read it and say, is this actually giving me accurate information, right? And then you have to, go in that tune it more, right? But then AI, from a cybersecurity perspective, I think too, gives us more predictability in, on the proactive side, right, of the house. So like, how can we use analytics and apply ML and AI to it to, find the right things to work on, and really bring actionable insight into what we're doing. And then from a reactive standpoint, like threat, things like that, being able to more empower our cybersecurity analysts and professionals to, again, follow what they should be, paying attention to, and maybe use AI to automate more things. That way our professionals can actually focus on the right things, right? And so I see, it's kind of, every decade our products and platforms kind of evolve, and like new technologies come out. And so you're going to start to see like things that came out 10, 15 years ago just be recreated using these new technologies to make better efficiencies and effectiveness within the platform, right? And so I saw Jason get on the AI. I probably didn't talk about what you wanted to talk about, though.
Plus you're touching on other questions I'm going to ask, Bill. But that's fine. Jason, opportunities for founders, and people getting into this.
What's AI? Just kidding. Just kidding.
I like that.
So AI, I think, is the most disruptive tech that we will see potentially in our lifetime, right? You have the internet, and then I think AI is right up there. The fear that I have, and this is what actually keeps me up at night, is that general, like adversarial AI, is it lowers the barrier for the bad actors too, right? So the problem with deepfake especially is that Jeremy nailed it, right? You have these advanced nation state actors, right? That are using these advanced tools. But with deepfake, in a few minutes and a couple clicks of buttons, you can make hyper realistic deepfake that anyone can do, right? And that lowers the barrier and the bar for a threat actor to go after a business. And that broadens basically the attack surface as well, and the amount of people that can execute basically a campaign or phishing or fraud against an organization. That's what really terrifies me, is that AI has the ability to make it much easier for the bad actors to be more proficient, and it opens up the gates to anyone to be able to impersonate someone or do a phish. So that's what really scares me about AI.
Okay. And so I think you're saying one of the opportunities is in AI as applies to cybersecurity. How do those two marry together? And understanding it, because I agree, that's evolving now. I think we're just at the beginning stages of what will that mean, and how is it used, good and bad, for cybersecurity. Okay. Well, good. Now we'll flip over to the favorite part, government regulations, and what's happening in that area. Well, I'll go back. I'll start with Jason. Government regulations, and how are they affecting this whole space of cybersecurity, sort of positively and negatively?
So I'm going to speak to deepfake again. But we're seeing lots of legislation and regulations coming out to help combat it, and it's great. I think the challenge that we're going to see is, how do we enforce these new regulations, right? How do law enforcement, how do public schools enforce basically laws against this stuff? And I don't think anyone has a really great answer to this yet, to be candid. I firmly believe in regulation and governance. I think it's just a matter of how do we apply these new laws and enforce them. And I don't have a clear answer to that yet. I think we're too early, for at least for deepfake and AI.
Okay. Are you finding any of those regulations are hampering you in any way of developing your company, or let's say your clients saying, wow, like Teresa or someone mentioned, how much money it would take, right, that painter to adapt, to a particular regulation? Are you seeing any of that?
No, not yet.
Okay.
No, I'm not seeing regulation hinder what we do. I'm seeing it basically restrict what we should be able to do, but again, I don't think your adversary or the bad guys are necessarily going to pay attention to regulation and say, hey, I'm not going to do that because there's a law, right? No bad actor
Yeah.
is going to follow the law. So no, not yet, to be candid.
Okay. How about you, Jeremy? Regulations.
This is an interesting subject. Because I mean, just to call it out, I would say the US is loosey goosey. So we put a lot of like Teresa was talking about the secure by design. CISA introduced that. NIST puts out things, and we just had an executive order actually from SolarWinds. What is it? Exec 14028 that talked about software bill of materials. And so when I say loosey goosey, like these things are put out there, and NIST isn't really a regulation, but it's guidance and recommendations, right? And so, but what we're seeing is kind of this inflection point where regulation hasn't really been driving adoption because a lot of these companies, they'll just pay the fines and they're done, right? And so in the case of like the SEC, going after the CISO of SolarWinds, yeah, that helps. But we also need to be more enforcing of these things too to actually make change. So the inflection point right now is CISOs or chief information security officers of larger companies are been putting into their procurement processes of more security, right? Like we actually have to validate that the security is in these attestations are no longer enough, right? And so, but that's not kind of taken a foothold yet. We're starting to see it. So like security right now, and the inflection point is security will sell. Security sells companies, right? And so the more that companies get into security, and they're not just getting through the sales processes with compliance, that's what we're starting to see today. So that means the CTO and CISO are like, oh, we've done the compliance things, but we also need to put security in place, and we want to see more of that being, verified, not, just hopes and faith that things are getting done, right? And so platforms are out there that do that. And then to Jason's point, I think honestly, cybersecurity insurance has the opportunity to actually drive the change in our market or our industry. And they're just not taking that stance yet. And so if they were able, because here's the thing is like once you get a breach, that's when our industry starts to actually do things, right? And so our industry is so reactive that we don't focus on proactive things. So you get that breach, guess what? The assumption is the cybersecurity insurance is going to save me, right? And oh, we spend millions of dollars on this stuff, and insurance is going to save my ass. Well, if cyber insurance actually went down the path of starting to validate proactive things that are in place instead of using old traditional things like security scores that monitor external out, or I'm sorry, external in. I'm not going to say any names, but those aren't very good for that's an incomplete strategy, right? And so we have to verify that their programs are internally are working, but also from an external in perspective, they're protected too. So cybersecurity insurance, I think, has the way to drive this force. And then I think also regulation will start to follow suit, right? And so, but we just, every single aspect needs to be more enforcing of what we're doing, and we're not. And so if you look at like, let's say EU, right? EU, GDPR, DORA, a lot of cybersecurity tools are being more adopted over in the Middle East, for example, and the European nations. Like that should show that like we're kind of lagging, and it's very visible. So our regulation needs to get stronger and more enforcing.
Yeah.
I'll get off my soapbox on that.
No. Thank you for that. I spent many years with trade organizations, professional societies, and for that self-regulation. And you're right. It usually is, and it would be other things, but breaches, right? All of a sudden everybody goes, hey, wait a minute, we need something for this. And usually it's better to be proactive with those sort of things than waiting for okay, now the government will come in and set the standards, and then yeah, it makes it a lot more complicated. So you're right, they should be self-regulating as much as
And Bob,
possible.
the
Yeah.
self attestation stuff is BS. Just to call it out. Like it's like and just it's for as an example, we had a client and they were going through some compliance certification and they
Mm.
passed. And I was like, how the hell did you guys pass on that platform? Because it's not secure. And they're like, oh, that's our we pointed them on the old platform, the old product. And the old product, which was certified or attested, whatever you want to, whatever compliance framework it is,
Mhm.
they passed on that. So they focused the auditors on that technology and that infrastructure. And yes, it looked good. But then they're like, okay, we're about to launch version 2, which is an entire new platform. And that was not ready, right? It was not secure. It was not
Mm.
compliant. But they were able to get the compliance framework on whatever they were trying to do. And I was like, that right there is a problem.
Yeah, yeah, no, perfect example of that. Thank you, Teresa. How about from your perspective? And I know you'll talk somewhat about government, I think.
Yes, so I have a very unique perspective, maybe a little
Yep.
different from my fellow panelists, but just to give a little bit of history. So Obama's executive order in 2010 was really what elevated the platform to controlled and classified information. And so really the guns began, the shot was fired in terms of how do we manage CUI starting in 2010. The Department of Defense immediately took the lead and created the DoD 252.204/7012, which is Safeguarding Covered Defense Information. In 2021, we had Biden's nation to improve cybersecurity. So 11 years later, we're still kind of figuring it out. And what we've identified 11 years later is that the Department of Defense really took the lead, and all other federal agencies did not yet have a federal acquisition regulation to cover management of controlled unclassified information. For people that may not know, CUI or controlled unclassified is information like PHI, your health information, PII, any personal identifying information. So it's not necessarily information that falls into the realm of classified, but it is in the information of sensitive, right? And that information that we don't want threat actors to possess in the area. So now we're in 2024. And the buzz is we still don't have the FAR that covers Department of Education, Department of Forestry, Department of Treasury, all of the other federal agencies outside of the Department of Defense. But because the DoD has taken such an advanced status, it is most likely going to be the model for all of the other agencies, all of the other entities within the federal government. So what does that mean? Well, we have the CMMC, the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, where up to this point has been self-attestation. And I agree with Jeremy, self-attestation poses significant risks. But the shift that we're having is that self-attestation is going away. You will now have auditors coming to validate that attestation, and similar to an ISO audit, make sure that you do have those controls and protections in place. And what the Department of Defense has done is that you will not be able to enter into a DoD contract if you don't have the proper level 1 or level 2 certification done by an independent entity, which right now is being spearheaded by this Cyber AB. So you have people that are going through training as registered practitioners, as registered assessors. You have companies that are being certified as CPA 03s, which allows them to actually go and conduct the audits. And then we're phasing this into next year that you have to have, that stamp of audit and approval and verification that those controls are in place. And the penalty is that if you don't, you're now no longer able to do business with a Department of Defense entity. So the incentive is there. Obviously, defense contracts can be very profitable for small and large business alike. If you want to stay in the game, this is coming. And the controls cover all areas, not only technical, but physical security, process and procedures, training requirements. It's a very comprehensive program to ensure that an organization, whether it's one employee or 100,000 employees, are doing what they need to do to maintain compliance and protect our nation's data.
Oh, wow. 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 And the costs for those, I think you were mentioning, your example. So small, medium, and large, what kind of expense are we talking about to do those kind of government contracts?
So, it's going to depend on the size of the organization. But like I was talking
Mhm.
about the painter who's a one-man show, I mean, technically he can go online for free. He can look at those controls. I mean, he can obviously consultants charge oftentimes anywhere between $30 to $150 an hour. A level one compliance may take 10 hours. So it can be anywhere from $300 to $1,700 for the most basic, smallest of businesses. When you're talking about 100,000 employees, well, you're talking about a much higher significant investment,
Yeah.
but those are companies that can afford it at that point.
Okay. Good. No, they're very, very helpful because there are a number of founders that are doing those government contracts, or they're in the process of getting SBIR grants in hope of, moving into that sector. And sounds like they have to add this, to the list of what do I need to get done to qualify.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely. And there is a system that the Department of Defense is using called the SPRS. And the way to
mhm.
access that system is a little bit intensive at this point. So I recommend any government contractors to begin that process of getting registered with the PIEE, which will give you access to the SPRS. And sorry for all the acronyms, but this is what these systems are called. So begin that
Okay.
early. And one last point, Bob, because I think this is really critical
Sure.
for those that want to do business with the federal government, is that historically, in managing compliance cyber programs for the DoD, you're able to use a POAM, what they call a plan of action and milestones, which means that with certain controls, if you're non-compliant, you can have a plan in place for how you're going to get compliance, who you're
Mhm.
going to sign it to, and by when. With the new CMMC model, that POAM, as of right now, there's new guidance that's supposed to be coming out in December. It does not allow for POAMs. So you have to have 100% compliance with all applicable controls in order to be certified, either level one or level two. So I highly recommend advanced preparation, because there's not a room for, well, we're not compliant there yet, but this is what we're doing to get there. You will not get your certification as of this time.
Okay. Wow. Good, good, good advice. Jeremy or Jason, anything more to add to that as far as, going through those audits or qualifying?
I
I
think you
don't know if I can add more.
I cannot do that.
All right. No, that's really good to know. Okay.
Nailed it.
So we'll go back to Jason. What advice? Well, it's a combination of what do you fear most, and what advice would you give to startup founders that are getting into cybersecurity? What are your best piece of advice to them?
What do I fear the most?
Yes. What do you fear the most, and then what advice would you give to someone starting out in cybersecurity?
I think the thing that keeps me awake at night is a breach,
Mhm.
personally, right? If you're a cybersecurity company and
Yep.
you get a ransomware attack or you get breach, it's game over, in my opinion, right? You got to eat
Mhm.
your own dog food first. So build with security first in mind, right? You need to set an example to your customers and to your clients. And so embrace security in everything that you do. I think that's fundamental. And my advice is just keep going. Like you will hit so many obstacles and so many boundaries in cybersecurity, but just having the grit and determination to push on and focusing on solving a real problem, right? Ensure that you understand what the problem truly is for your customer and then solving
Mhm.
that pain point through listening.
Okay. Great. Great. I think Paul said there was a question in the chat.
Sure, yeah. Paul Soul actually had a question
Okay.
about transitioning the cyber workforce and really filling that funnel of talent that is needed, whether it be through universities, through K through 12 education, or
Mhm.
even I know I have some friends that are looking for a career shift. So how would you best solve for that?
How about you, Jeremy?
I think in technology and just being in tech in general over the last 17 years is we gave more clout to people that actually didn't go to college for this and they executed, right? So they either took courses or they just started messing around with tools or whatever it was to actually give them real world experience. And a lot of times they would go back to school just because they needed that degree or whatnot. But
Mhm.
we always hired based on they could demonstrate based, their expertise and experience based on real world, right? And so they took action, they downloaded tools. A lot of these tools out there are free. If you're a single user, you can go and mess around and start to figure things out on your own, right? And so, but that's more of like the practitioner level. But if you're, maybe looking to become like a leader, you got to learn the languages, right? And the language of compliance, the language of cybersecurity, the language of product security, whatever kind of path you want to go down, figure out your niche that you want to go down and start doing your research. And because it's a very vast industry, like all those
Yeah.
acronyms that Teresa was talking about, you don't even want to talk about the tool acronyms that you could get into, right? And so every single one of those things, you can go down a different path. So it's really take a step back. What are you passionate about? Start to do research around those things. And I always talk about people, right? And so if you're passionate about a specific topic, find um, experts in that field, and they're all over LinkedIn. They're all over the place. You can find them. Start following them. Start interacting, and then eventually you can ask these people to be mentors, and then ask them what they did. Right? Like, hey, what are you reading? What courses did you take? And just get friendly with the people that you're wanting to be in and around in that industry. I would say to get into K-12 and stuff like that, like we're still kind of still at our infancy in the industry too. So like a lot of tools and stuff like that, and we're trying to move down into earlier to help educate, but like the other thing we have to worry about is money, right? And capital and staying alive. And so we don't really get paid to do business in K-12. Right. And so while I would like to follow the Microsoft kind of like get into the school system and bake yourself in, it's really hard to do. So like we're talking to universities to start kind of moving down that path, but also the programs have to be adjusted too, and we're not in charge of that, right? So like the professors and things like that need to take a little bit of a step back and say, okay, what's the future and how do we implement that into our program? And then kind of go out to the marketplace and say, okay, these tools or these vendors or these consultancies need to help us, build out the program, and then maybe offer some solutions for free or at very low cost. And so actually I see like UCF and USF are doing things like that, right? And so those are in FSU, right? They're taking a step back and looking at, okay, how can we evolve our program and bring these solutions in place? But yeah, I'll let Teresa go.
Okay. Yeah. Teresa, your perspective.
Sorry, I'm just really excited about this topic and the potential
Okay.
for. So I think it begins with a self-assessment and self-awareness. To Jeremy's point, and I'm fully aligned, this is not a field where you need a traditional four-year degree to enter into the market and to study. The Department of Defense had a manual 8570 that had a table for all of the different certifications under the different areas of cyber. So if you are a person that is very application oriented, you want to be like my husband and co-founder of Ashar Technologies, he's the behind the keyboard pushing the buttons kind of guy. So he got a certified ethical hacker certification. He knew in our industry we needed to have that compliance and administrative certification, so he got the CISSP. So if you're more of an admin compliance oriented person, then I highly recommend CompTIA has Security Plus. That's where you can start, and you can move up from Security Plus into like CISSP. There's also Google certificates. So it's really deciding, do I want to go commercial? Do I want to go government? And then what is the certification path to get me there? There's a lot of free information. I can't tell you how many times I've gone to bed and I hear the Indian professor from MIT coming out of the computer in my own bedroom because there's a lot of free training out there. So I highly recommend Google the videos, start to get familiar with the different areas. And then DoD Directive 8140 is the new manual that's replaced 8570. There's a lot of wonderful information on cyber training that the Department of Defense is looking for, and that can help chart your course as well.
Terrific. Thank you. Jason, anything to add?
I think Jeremy nailed it. The pitfall that I see from so many people is that you're right, cyber is so broad, it's a very broad domain, and people try to boil the ocean, focus on a core domain, right? What you're passionate about, laser focus on that. Where I think the cybersecurity industry is lacking, and we need to lead it, kind of step it up, is internships, right? There's a lack of internship programs across the board. So getting aligned with a local college or university, I would love to do an internship program, me personally, but I don't see that as being very common in the field. So I think that's one thing that would help these people transition from whatever they're doing into cyber. And I think as a whole, we need to do a better job at doing internship programs.
Okay, thanks. Paul Coulter, any other questions pop up? Wanted to leave the last few minutes for that.
I did have one other question. Just how do you view, and Jason, really to your point right there about, staying in your lane and staying specific, how do you view the new wave of evolution in cybersecurity in terms of competition versus cooperation with so many of the different new ventures that are taking place in cyber?
I don't know. I don't have a good answer for that one, to be candid. I'd have to think about that a little bit.
How about you, Jeremy or Teresa? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I've got thoughts. So competition versus cooperation, I think it's very important for the cyber industry to have both. So we have cooperation in the terms that we have these standards that are published, right? These guidelines through NIST, through the CSCR, the Cybersecurity Research Institute, through the CISO teams, right? So we have these overarching guidelines and requirements that help us to ensure we're all running in the same direction. We're driven by the same focus areas and cooperation. In terms of competition is always good for commerce. It's always going to translate value to the client at the end of the day or to the end user. And I think competition ensures that we continue to fine-tune our skills, that we remain, abreast of the information that's coming out, the strategies that are coming out, because we're competing in an economic environment. I mean, that's the core of US economics, and I think it's critical in cybersecurity. But I do think that this is a very collaborative environment as well. And I think that cyber companies, and especially those that are focused on US interests and protecting, the US population and our partners around the world, we are going to continue to work together and support one another in terms of overall security and protection.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So, Jeremy.
I would say from a product company perspective, and being VC backed, it's being competitive is very it's cutthroat, right? Like our industry is cutthroat. And so if I were a service company, because I always think in the terms of software, I would be differentiating myself with software on how do we automate, how do we make the customer experience better and more efficient. And, I could come up with many ideas for auditors for that. But from a product focused, it is cutthroat. So like we're always trying to out innovate, right? We're always trying to think of how do we complement. So like one of our niche value propositions is we can compete and or we can complement, right? And so when you kind of go into there in that mindset, you figure out like what your competitors are doing really, really well, and then stay in your lane. And there's areas where you could go very deep, and then there's areas that you could just go very broad and not deep, right? And then bring your competitors in as the deep kind of integrated solution, right? And so we're always thinking of how can we use that complementary aspect to offer a more holistic solution and offer more value on top of the two competing firms, as opposed to we're going to go head to head with them and try to win every time. Like, how do we actually complement each other, right? And so, but it is very cutthroat in the cybersecurity space. Like, I don't know if anybody's paid attention, but there was like less than, I don't even know, when we first started 5 years, 6 years ago, the amount of cybersecurity companies have gone significantly into the over 5,000, 6,000, and there's where you'd have like one or two or three competitors. Now there's like 10, 20 competitors. So it's how do you out innovate, and how do you also complement?
Good. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, last just a couple of minutes. I'll kind of flip it around and ask the three panelists, what can we do to help you? The ecosystem that we have here, what is it that we can provide you, assist you with, as all founders? And that's what we do. We serve our community. What can we do for you? Anybody? Go ahead, Jeremy. You look like you're ready to go.
I was gonna say we're actually in the middle of a capital raise, and so we almost have it all filled up. And if anybody's familiar with Tenable, the founders of Tenable backed us, and so we have some pretty legit cybersecurity industry thought leaders behind us as well. So for validation that we have the right novel offering, there's that. And then we're also looking for networking, right? So we're looking for partners that think differently out of the box, that are looking to move from traditional cybersecurity reactive approaches to proactive approaches. And then sales. I mean, all of our companies need revenue to live, right? And so if we're going to build the Florida ecosystem and make more jobs and things like that, like, opportunities are what our lifeblood.
Okay, thanks, Teresa. What can we do for you?
Yeah, so obviously I've always believed word of mouth is the best marketing tool that's out there. And so if there's anything that we've talked about at Ashire Technologies that stuck a chord, or where you think we might be a good, strong fit potential partner, please share that experience out there in the network. Our website is www.ashiretech.com. We do offer cyber profiles for those that are seeking cyber insurance. So my fellow panelists talked a lot about cyber insurance. We can do a comprehensive profile for you, and that is at no charge. It's included in the monthly subscription of $35 per user in our security service provider application. And so we can also make sure that you can present that full profile to an insurance company and get your best rates, knowing that you're being scanned and addressing any vulnerabilities. And then if you're talented and you're looking for work, we're always taking resumes. We've got a beautiful brand new building in St. Cloud, Florida, and we're always looking for ways to build our team. So feel free to send us a note on our website and shoot us your resume. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay. And Jason, we'll wrap up with you.
Perfect. Drive awareness, right? Cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is really important. And partnerships. I think that growing basically the community and then partnering to solve is most important. So always looking to partner and help any way we can. So thank you all very much. It was a pleasure to be here today. It's nice to meet you.
Thank you all for joining us. Everybody that's participating and the panelists, thank you very, very much, especially given the looming storm. I appreciate you taking the time. So I want to thank everybody. Appreciate it. Everybody stay safe. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye.